Have you ever tried eating clean and found it worked extremely well, but then the cravings start to kick in and you tell yourself no, but eventually you're tucking into bowlfuls worth of cereal? You feel terrible and you promise yourself it will never happen again until it does. This is known as the clean eating trap, and it's probably the reason why your weight is yo-yoing and the frustration never ends. So let's put an end to that. I know this is real because I've lived it. Back in 2023, I found myself cutting weight year round in order to get an amateur boxing fight, and I had zero idea what to do for weight loss, so guess where I went? TikTok. And here all I got told was to be more disciplined, stop eating shit and poison, and just eat clean, otherwise I don't want it bad enough. And it worked great. I looked the healthiest and I was the leanest I'd ever been in my life, but I was miserable on the inside. I had to become obsessed with my food. My meals got increasingly smaller and smaller, and some days I would just have fruit for breakfast. And I'll never forget myself counting the calories burned on a cross trainer just so I could eat a protein bar. But it got to the point where enough was enough. I was in London, I stayed at a Premier Inn, and they had an all-inclusive breakfast. And this is where I had zero self-control. Plate after plate, I found myself binging on all of the foods I restricted for so long. Then I was extremely ashamed of myself. I was trapped inside my own head. I was snappier with my own mum, and the self-talk was pretty brutal. And after that point, I began digging into why I had zero control around these sorts of foods and why did I feel so ashamed in the first place. It's just food. I then discovered a book called The Comfort Crisis. Up until this point, I saw certain foods as bad, shit, unhealthy, poison, you name it. And little did I know, I was actually giving the food a moral value, and consequently, I'd over-restrict it. And I genuinely didn't really trust myself around an abundance of food. And I would constantly think about it if I was. So when I did eventually cave in and enjoyed something like a cinnamon bun, oh my goodness, I would have like a mini meltdown. Which is when the book helped me realize that it wasn't a discipline problem. It was my attitude towards food, which was. All foods are just a combination of nutrients and calories. Picture a spectrum. On one end, you've got low calorie and nutrient dense foods, such as your veggies. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got your foods that are more calorie dense and not as nutritious, such as your pizzas and chocolate. Neither are inherently good or bad, as that depends on context. It's important to view them objectively, as they just have different calorie and nutrient makeups. Let me use a simple analogy to explain why restriction backfires on you. Imagine you're in Africa and you want to avoid getting eaten by a lion because that would be unhealthy. Naturally, it's your brain's responsibility to constantly think of the lion so you know exactly what to avoid. Now, if we replace the lion with a piece of chocolate, in order to avoid the chocolate, you have to constantly think about it. And the more you tell yourself you can't have something, the more that obsession grows. This is known as the ironic process in theory, where the act of suppression makes your thoughts louder. So to escape the clean eating trap, we need to start reframing the way we see our diets. The problem with saying that you're on a diet implies that there's an end date, so that once the diet's finished, you'll just revert back to your old ways. Whereas if you understand that you've got more or less nutritious diets, aka healthy or unhealthy diets, and it's just the foods that you consistently eat. But if you actually want to maintain your results long term, you have to understand that the things that you do to lose the weight is also what will help you keep it off. If your current approach isn't something you enjoy and you can't even bear the thought of doing it for the next 10 years, then I'd probably rethink your strategy. And I'm definitely not saying you have to be in a calorie deficit forever, but rather if you don't develop the crucial skills of being mentally flexible, learning how to make macro-friendly meals that align to your goals, or even integrating your favorite foods while still being able to make progress, you'll just revert back to how you was. So the first step to overcoming this is removing the labels we place on food and see it for what it actually is. Then it's essential you start developing the abundance mindset, where you have the genuine belief you can eat whatever you want and however much you want of it. And by doing this, you're removing the scarcity away from food, and it loses that compelling desire to overeat on it, and consequently your self-control will be better. It's going from I'm not allowed a pizza to I could have that pizza if I really wanted, however I know for a fact I'll be hungrier later, and to me it's just simply not worth it. But to develop this belief, it doesn't require you to shout affirmations in the mirror like, oh, I have an abundance mindset, but it requires you to take action and building evidence that this is possible for yourself. And it might just look like including a downsized portion of your favorite snacks. Every choice you make has pros and cons attached. Technically speaking, you could eat chocolate and lose a load of weight. You'd get a lot of momentary pleasure, which would be a lot of fun. However, you'll be moodier, hungrier, your health wouldn't be that great. So it'd probably be a good idea to just have some of it and make the rest of your diet with the stuff that rots within a week, which is usually the minimally processed stuff. This is known as the 80-20 rule, where 80% of your diet contributes to your health and 20% goes to your indulgences. And as soon as you remove the labels and the over-restrictive rules, your ability to get results will be better and you'll actually enjoy the process of doing so. But in order for you to actually make progress, you must avoid the worst fat loss mistake here,